I definitely think the Concord Review standards are very high, which is what makes it so competitive. It publishes 4 times a year, and it gets way more applications for a submission than it can possibly publish. So if you are a student who wrote some great history, you submit it to the Concord Review, and they say no, it doesn't mean that your essay isn't great, because they just don't have enough room to publish all of the good essays. But the fact that Paris's essay was accepted for publication is really a testament to the fact that he wrote a really high quality paper. Now, there are other journals out there, so Concord Review is not the be all end all. But one of the things I really like about the Concord Review, in addition to the fact that it publishes good history because it is quite competitive, is that it mirrors professional academic journals. As a historian myself, I have published in academic journals. I've been through the book publishing process, and so I know what professionals do. And the Concord Review does try to mirror that, in that it does peer review, and it has comments for students, and it doesn't, it accepts a lot of work, but it suggests, like, this is what you could do to revise and possibly resubmit, which is a very academic thing to do. So I like this. This is really good training for students who might want to go into the humanities as a career. And then finally, of course, one of the reasons why we're all here is because publishing in the Concord Review, or even getting it just accepted, even if your piece wasn't yet published, getting accepted for publication is incredibly impressive on college applications, especially if you are interested in doing something in the humanities. But even if you weren't interested in doing something in the humanities, the fact that you could write an essay that is so clear, that demonstrates your analytical and research skills, that is important for all disciplines. So the Concord Review doesn't accept anything that doesn't have clear writing and great analytical skills featured in it. So what is it the Concord Review is looking for? What is it that Paris did to really meet this high bar? Well, first of all, they're looking for longer essays than what your students would typically write in high school. And I say typically because there are, of course, students who do research projects that are Concord Review length, but not many. And at least in my experience working with Ivymind students, oftentimes the National History Day competition offers them the first chance to write a really long history paper, and that is a max of 2,500 words. Concord Review is looking for essays that are approximately double that length. Okay, so the Concord Review project is therefore a serious research project, and it's one that students probably, they may, but mostly they don't get that experience in high school or from National History Day. If you go to the Concord Review website, they suggest that the minimum threshold is 4,000 words, but they like length. So I suggest to students that they aim for, all told, at least 5,000 words plus. These papers can't just be any old papers. They have to be very well written. And it's one of the things I help students do is polish their prose. Get rid of grammar mistakes, make sure everything is clear, and polish that prose. It should be perfectly cited. Chicago style notes, that's the formatting style that historians use in their professional discipline, and that is what the Concord Review expects. So having those footnotes or endnotes, making sure that they are perfectly formatted, that is a project in and of itself. And then, of course, the Concord Review wants pieces that are written in English only, and that's part of the well-written, polished component of this, is that you're writing in this beautiful, clear, analytical style of English. Okay, this is a historical paper. So the Concord Review is not looking for sociology. It's not looking for English lit. It's not looking for creative writing. It's looking for history. And so again, students sometimes have a strength in creative writing or in English literary analysis, but that's not what the Concord Review is looking for. So it's going to be a history paper, which means students have to bring a sophisticated historical argument to their paper. And it's not narrative. Oftentimes students in high school and college mistake describing the past, even if you describe it really beautifully and clearly, that's not doing history. Doing history is making a claim about the past, having an argument about it. And so it's really important whenever I meet with students that they have a solid argument in their paper, because the rest of the paper is built from that sophisticated historical argument up front. And then finally, the other big thing that the Concord Review is looking for are use of primary and secondary sources. Primary sources are sources that are from the past, and secondary sources is scholarship about the past. And so students have to use both, and they have to use a bunch of both in a Concord Review essay. So you have to engage with them. You have to make sure that the sources are well digested and clearly explained in the paper. And then, of course, those sources need to be used in an effective way to prove that argument that is so essential to the Concord Review historical paper. So I think I first met Paris last spring in 2023. And when we worked together, we didn't start from scratch. Paris already had a paper, and he wanted to take it and make it into the Concord Review length and level of beautiful, sophisticated historical writing. Now, some students do start from scratch, and this is why Miss Betty has the summer research projects, because those summer research projects are a student's opportunity to begin researching and working on a project that can eventually turn into a Concord Review submission. That's not where Paris was. He already had a paper to begin with, but it wasn't ready yet. The argument was a little bit all over the place. I remember that the argument had multiple components, and it was unclear what the actual focus needed to be. Some of the paper didn't make sense with the argument. And so we had work to do to kind of like select what was actually going to be the focus and then get the paper into shape to conform to that. So there are many things going on in this paper, which is a good thing, but you need to like wrangle them. And at first, fashion, media, and suffrage were these big topics that Paris wanted to explore, but they weren't wrangled. So our working relationship then was mostly about wrangling this stuff. And so first of all, we discussed what should this paper focus on. And that meant that Paris had to go and do more research. It meant that Paris had to make decisions about what exactly was he trying to argue. And as my role as mentor is not to tell Paris, or any student for that matter, what they're doing. This is their project, right? You know, and you write a project because you're interested in it. But I try to help the students see what might be the best course given what they have, or what might be the more difficult or easy option to research. And then students go and take my advice and make decisions. So Paris did a bunch more research. And I recall I was asking Paris for a while to find a particular kind of anecdote to begin his paper with. And it took him a while to find it because he had to keep researching. And finally Paris found it. The next step of the process, after we sort of figure out what needs to be done, is more researching, lots of rewriting, and oftentimes restructuring the essay. Sometimes you write something and it's not going to work in the end, and you got to redo it. And part of the process of writing, I have learned over the years, is that you're never finished. It's never perfect. And you have to get ready to do multiple revisions. It's just the way it is. And so just get used to it when you're doing history or any really humanities subject. And Paris didn't have a problem with that. So I gave feedback at each step. Multiple revisions happened. And then finally, revise at every step of the way, but definitely at the end to make sure that the paper not only makes sense in the big picture, the argument and the evidence and the structure, but also the paper is clear and perfectly written at the sentence level. And this is where I do like a really close polish, a really close read, wordsmithing every sentence. It's a great idea to get other teachers involved at this part of the process, because it's always good to have more eyeballs to catch mistakes that your eyes just don't see after you read a paper many times. And so this is the process. So the final paper that was submitted is about 5,700 words. It was called Reconstructing Political Identity Through Consumerism in the Suffrage Movement. And I would like to end here by showing you what I mean about a sophisticated argument that is an argument. It makes a claim, but it also is, this is not like a novice sort of analysis. This is a very good, sophisticated claim. And I'm not surprised that the Concord Review really appreciated this. This was in the introduction of the paper. I've copied it and pasted here. And the text that's in blue is the text that I think is the most direct towards making the claim. So I'll only read that, although the slide, of course, has all of this argument put together. So here is the argument, this very excellent, sophisticated argument. Women activists use fashion combined with a willingness to make political compromise in order to drive forward the goal of women's suffrage. So fashion and compromise to meet this goal. But when the goal was threatened, a politically astute suffragists compromised, portraying themselves as feminine, through consumerist tactics such as fashion advertisements, visual and performance arts instead. Suffragists thus exploited their role as part of consumer culture to present their worthiness as future voters who would focus on matters pertaining to the home. Thus, suffragists manipulated the politics surrounding fashion to their advantage by emphasizing the importance of creating more feminine and less threatening public image through their dress. So put differently, Harris's argument here is about how women who want a particular political goal manage to achieve it and adapt when necessary by using common culture, particularly the late 19th, early 20th century feminine dress rules. And in the paper, Paris writes about how sometimes women suffragists sort of step over the line and then they course correct because you don't want to offend people by looking too masculine. And so this paper was a beautiful political history tied with cultural history, tied with women's history. And that the way that all of this comes together in the argument and then contextualized in the paper is why the Concord Review found this paper to be publish worthy. And then finally, I just wanted to give you a sense, this is only a selected part of the paper's bibliography, but what you see here are many different sources consulted. There are primary sources, there are secondary sources, they are all academic sources. And Paris had to go through and read real scholarship written by real historians, and a bunch of it. Some of them are articles, some of them are monographs, some of them are databases that have primary sources listed in them. But all of these are the kinds of sources that graduate students or professional historians would use in their own work. And Paris is already engaging with them, which is what also makes this paper such a sophisticated, excellent example of what the Concord Review would publish. So it was a pleasure working with Paris, and it really is quite the achievement to be